to get through tonight. Well, if you're just joining us, this is the Herb Garden 101 webinar. It's sponsored by the City of Burlingame and the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to go over some housekeeping tips. I know this is probably everyone's, umpteenth Zoom webinar, but just so we're all on the same page, all attendees are muted by default, so you don't have to worry. The instructor will pause periodically for questions, and we do encourage questions from the audience. There are two ways to do that. The first way is to use the raise hand feature at the bottom. And then the second is the Q&A function. And we will be reading questions for the instructor. If we don't get to all the questions within that section, we will have a Q&A section at the very end. And also this webinar is being recorded, and we will share a copy of this recording to everyone. So if you have to duck out early, or if you know someone else who might be interested in this topic but wasn't able to attend tonight, we'll share the link to this webinar as well. Next.
Oops, we did the raise hand already. Next.
There we go.
There we go. All right.
Great. So I mentioned that this class is hosted by City Burlingame, but it's also hosted by the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency, which is a long organization, but it's called BOSCA for short. And BOSCA represents 26 agencies that include cities, water districts, a water company, and the university that purchase water from San Francisco Regional Water System. Collectively, there are 1.8 million people and over 40,000 businesses and community organizations in Alameda, Santa Clara, and San Mateo counties. And BOSCA's goal is high quality water at a fair price.
Next.
Great. And so if you're joining us tonight, this is part of BOSCA's landscape education workshop. And there are a couple of main program objectives of these classes. One, outdoor water use represents the single largest untapped opportunity for water conservation in our service area. And two, outdoor water use reduction through the use of water efficient plants and innovative techniques can help conserve water and ensure that future water supply needs of our communities are met. And there are additional ways to save. Depending on which city you live in, there may be additional rebate opportunities that you can take advantage of. The first one being Lawn Be Gone. That program provides rebates of $1 to $4 per square foot of lawn replace. And there's also a rain barrel harvesting program. If you live in the city of Burlingame, you can receive up to $200 in rebates for rain barrels. Next. And just a couple more programs. One is a smart controller rebate and installation program. Basically, if you have an irrigation system, there is a smart controller rebate that will automatically set your irrigation schedules and can adjust due to changes in the weather. So it's connected via Wi-Fi to the internet. So if it knows that it's going to be raining or raining is forecasted later, it won't schedule your watering while it's raining. So you can, set it and forget it with this controller rebate program. And then lastly, there's also a rain garden rebate program where if you're already participating in the Lawn Be Gone program, it's very similar, with that you replace, part of your lawn and you create a rain garden to capture and harvest rainwater. And instead of letting all that stormwater runoff go into the bay, it stays on your site and is naturally replenishing the soil and groundwater table. So for more information about these programs, you can go to bayareaconservation.org. And just one more slide for me, or a couple more slides, almost done. If this is your first workshop, or maybe this is your 10th workshop, there are a number of free landscape education workshops available. Here is a list of all the upcoming workshops that we have that's provided from Bosca. Again, you can register at bayareaconservation.org, and all of these workshops are recorded as well. And last slide for me. This is a really great resource that I wanted to share with everyone. It's called the bayareagardening.org, and it's a online website that you can go to get inspiration from different gardens. There's a whole plant list that you can choose of if you're wanting to switch your garden to something that's drought tolerant but don't know where to start. You can start with this resource because it will show you all the different types of plants that you can put into your garden, as well as a watering guide on when you should irrigate them. And with that,
Oops. There we go. There we go. Sorry.
yeah, I will hand it off to our lovely speaker, Loretta O'Brien.
Thank you. All right. So welcome everybody. My name is Loretta O'Brien, and tonight we are going to go through the very basics of growing culinary herbs in your backyard. We will really just go over the basics. We're really talking about things that can grow fairly easily. And I am not a medicinal herbalist. I have been growing herbs in my backyard and at a garden that I run for a very long time. So I do have some experience. That said, it's really easy to make mistakes. And so if you make mistakes, and this is the first time that you've had a garden or started an herb garden, just know that you will make mistakes and it'll be fine. We'll just move on. Okay. I am the co-founder of a nonprofit called Pacifica Gardens. Pacifica Gardens is an urban ag project in Pacifica. And I am also the owner of a small herb nursery called Fog Time. So first of all, before we get started, we'll have Jennifer help us out with a poll. We would like to know about your experience growing herbs. So if you would be so kind, please take the poll so that we know how much experience you have. Okay.
Great. So the responses are coming in.
Looks like we have, okay. Outstanding.
Give it maybe 10 more seconds and then I'll close it. All right.
Okay.
I think we got most attendees. So
Yeah.
thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Okay.
And here are the results.
Okay, so most of us have been gardening for 1 to 3 years, and most of us are going to be planting in containers. Okay. All right. Sounds good. All right, we can go from there. Let's see. Great. All right. And will that go away? Yes, it will. Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's go over some reasons why you might want to start an herb garden. First of all, it's just fun and and very enjoyable. Fresh homegrown herbs are definitely more flavorful, nutrition, and they're economical. So for those of you who enjoy cooking, there's nothing more sort of unsatisfying than buying a little packet of herbs at the grocery store only to use a portion of it, or to open it up and find that it's sort of wilted and was cut and packed weeks ago or days ago. So fresh homegrown herbs are definitely much more satisfying. If this is your first or, first gardening experience in your backyard. Growing herbs as a beginning exercise is actually a great way to start your edible garden. Many herbs are what we call perennial or biennial, and they'll give you herbs for months or even years. The hardy perennials will, and which will give you herbs, fresh herbs throughout the year. With only a couple of exceptions, culinary herbs are easy to grow and will give you a fun and satisfying experience, hopefully. Okay, herbs are aromatic and add beauty to your garden. Most herbs are tolerant to a variety of conditions, so you don't have to have the perfect climate, okay, to grow herbs. And even if you are in a more difficult climate like I'm on the San Mateo coast, we get a lot of fog. We can still grow plenty of culinary herbs. Herbs attract bees and other beneficial insects in your garden. In fact, a lot of people actually plant herbs to help draw bees and insects into their garden, into their regular vegetable garden. And most of our herbs are going to be water wise. When we start talking about those Mediterranean herbs, we're going to see that they like it dry. So that's a good thing. So what herbs should you grow? I teach beginning vegetable growing as well, and the answer is grow what you like. Okay, so if you're not a big fan of, I don't know, rosemary, then don't grow it. Although it is beautiful and it attracts bees, if it takes up space that you'd rather plant parsley, then do that. With your first herb garden, it's actually best to begin with just 3 to 4 hardy, okay, low maintenance perennial herbs. And those would be like chives, oregano, rosemary, sage, and thyme. Sounds like the Scarborough Fair. It is actually. Parsley is a good one that you can grow. It grows easily. It's called a biennial, which we'll talk about and what that means in a little bit. As you enjoy success, you can try adding other types of annuals that require a little bit more attention, such as basil, cilantro, and dill. Although all of these basil, cilantro, and dill, most of them grow very well in the Bay Area, with the exception of the coast side, they do require a little bit more attention. And for the new gardener or the new herb gardener, sometimes they can present a little bit of a challenge. So should we plant annuals or perennials? So what are they? Okay, annuals are herbs that grow their entire life cycle in one season. So we're going to plant those in the spring, and they will go to seed in a few months. Okay, so you'll need to plant your annual herbs every year. So your annual herbs, basil, cilantro, dill. Okay, you'll have to plant those every year. There are tons of herbs. I'm just really going over the sort of like the most common basic ones. And then parsley is, like I said, a biennial. So you'll need to plant that one every couple of years. So annuals are available as plant starts, or you can grow them from seeds. If you've never grown anything from a seed, it's a very satisfying experience, but you might just want to buy your annuals as well as your perennials in starts from a reputable nursery. Perennials are herbs that continue to grow year after year. Most of them will flower in the spring, okay? Some of them will slow their growth in the cooler weather, and some will go dormant, okay? Tarragon isn't one of those that will go dormant. Perennials tend to be more hardy than annuals. That said, marjoram is considered a tender perennial, and in some climates, you'll actually need to grow that as an annual. And perennials are going to be more easily grown from plant starts. Most of our perennials, like oregano, rosemary, sage, thyme, those, they all can be planted from seeds. However, they grow slow, and sometimes it's just easier and even less expensive just to buy 1 or 2 plants. And when we're first starting out, we only really want to start with 1 or 2 plants. So buy an entire seed packet of thyme, which will give you, 50 plants. You might not be something that you want to take on right away. So here we are. We've kind of already talked about our seeds or our starts. So again, if you're a beginning gardener, we do recommend that you start your herb garden by purchasing your herb starts. And as we have success, we can actually plant basil, dill, and cilantro from seeds. And most good nurseries, so when would you buy those? Most good nurseries are going to have a variety of annual and perennial herbs in the spring. So many of our perennials are available. I mean, will grow and can be planted throughout the season. However, finding them can be a little bit problematic. So if you are intending to grow some perennials, and it's a good idea to get them now, because sometimes you might not be able to get them later on in the season. When should I plant my herbs? Okay, so our warm weather herbs like basil and dill and cilantro should be planted in the springtime after all danger of frost has passed. So if you're like me, you probably have a min-max thermometer outside, and so you can actually tell how cold it is at night. So I watch my my thermometer on a regular basis, and it doesn't really frost here on the coast very much, but if the temperature is getting down into still down into the 40s, I'm not going to be planting dill and cilantro out there until it gets to be at least about 50 degrees. So parsley, which is a biennial, can be planted throughout the spring and the summer. And we'll talk a little bit more about the advantages of parsley. And our hardy perennials like chives, oregano, and sage, rosemary, and thyme, all right, as we've already mentioned, can be planted throughout the growing season. Okay. So in areas that have mild winters, like for instance, California, for once, Northern California, except for the foothills and the snow, but the Bay Area, we really do have mild winters. And on the coast side, they're even milder. Fall plantings of parsley and cilantro will overwinter and produce throughout the winter. So one of my favorite things to do is right around September, I grow parsley and cilantro from seed, and I get them growing, and then I'll put them in my garden bed and let them grow all winter long. So I have cilantro all winter long, which is really cool. So where should I plant my herbs? So before you start planting, kind of take a look at your garden, allot the space that you want. You might want to be intermixing your herbs with your edibles if you have a vegetable garden, or even your ornamentals. But take a look at your space. But know that most herbs are going to need full sun. Okay, 6 or more hours of direct sunlight per day. If you have a garden that receives less sun, choose herbs that can do well in partial shade. So parsley, mint, chives, and tarragon will all take a little shade. In fact, I actually have them in pots growing underneath my my lemon tree. Okay, so you have lots of creative options for your herb gardens, and herb gardens have been planted for centuries, from very, very elaborate to very, very simple. So, but when we're first starting, it's best to start small and start kind of simple. Okay. So we can plant directly into our garden space. We can create raised beds, or even create spirals. Herb spirals are very fun. We can plant our herbs in containers. We can put them on our decks, on our patios, or even in your windowsills. Okay.
And,
So yeah.
on that, so we have a couple questions regarding containers. One participant wants to know, how large of a container do you need per herb? Yeah, so
that's a couple slides ahead. So if I could, So definitely we'll address that, and in a second. So if you can just hang on to that, that'd be great.
Great. And then I think the second question, I think you might have already answered. One participant wants to know, can I plant my herbs in containers and grow them in my garden window? Yes, that's exactly. Small, you can plant your herbs in smaller pots and put them inside, or a lot of herbs can be grown inside.
You will have to fertilize them a little bit more often because they're in small pots. But absolutely, I know a lot of people, in fact, here on the coast side, that's pretty much the only way we can grow basil. So absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so you can plant directly into your garden. And before I moved to the coast, I lived in Fremont and I didn't have gophers. So I planted almost all of my herbs in my actual garden soil. I don't do that now because I have mega gophers. And so I do almost all of my herbs in containers. But if you are going to plant in soil, most herbs are going to need well-drained soil. So if you have really compacted clay soil, you're going to need to loosen it, and or maybe you would consider planting them in containers. So we want to prepare our soil, our garden space by loosening the soil about 12 to 18 inches, and then amend the soil with really good compost. Okay, so adding compost will enhance the drainage and provide nutrients, okay, and also hold some water too, although clay pretty much holds water. Okay. Raised beds. Now this is a fancy, very fancy, and sort of raised bed slash spiral. It's actually really cool, but you can plant your herbs in just an ordinary square raised bed. I plant all of my hardy perennials in pots, and then I put my parsley and my cilantro in one of my raised beds, sort of intermixed with my lettuce and my kale. So you can kind of plan things out a little bit. Raised beds allow you to control the type of soil that you have, and like we said, most of our herbs are going to need well-drained soil. So if you are creating raised beds, you can put some nice sandy loam in there. Okay. All right. So containers, right? So it looks like most of us are growing herbs in containers. I love this idea. These are two herbs that I have growing in my patio. That's oregano, and that's my new lavender. That's a new baby, hasn't flowered yet, so I'm looking forward to that. But containers are great for herbs. So large pots. Okay, so the question was, what size pot? I like to cook, and when I go out, I like to really cut some. So I usually use a fairly good size pot. So these pots here are like 12, 18 inches, but you can grow them even smaller if you want. Okay, so make sure that whatever pot that you use has holes in the bottom. Like we're talking about a minute ago, drainage is going to be really important. So if you have a fun thing like a galvanized tub or something, those don't come with holes in the bottom. So turn them over, get out your drill bit and poke, 8 or 10 holes in it. I have this is actually a galvanized tub behind there. It has my blueberries in it. So making sure that you're going to be whatever container you're growing in has drainage holes in it. Okay. So containers are great because they you can put them right outside your kitchen door or right outside on your patio. It's really satisfying to be while you're cooking. I like to make soup stock. I make vegetable soup stock all the time. So I go out to my pots and I clip and I bring them in and I start making my soup stocks. I think it's just great. Now, if I had to traipse all the way down my garden, but I live on the slope, I might not be so inclined. So growing your herbs in containers is actually quite convenient. Okay. Herbs, there are also some herbs that you kind of almost always need to put in a container, like mints and lemon balm. They tend to spread everywhere. I made this mistake many years ago. I planted this wonderful spearmint in one of my raised beds, and pretty soon I had spearmint in all of my raised beds. It took me a long time to take it all out. Now I've got mint in one pot, okay, and I control it by keeping it in a pot. Okay, let's see. So soil, we've already mentioned this. Most herbs are going to will thrive in typical garden soil. It sounds like most of us are going to be working in containers, so we'll talk a little bit about what kind of soil to put in your containers. Again, you know, it's all about the drainage for our herbs. Okay. So herbs like thyme and rosemary, lavender and tarragon, boy, they need very well drained soil. Okay. So even kind of gritty, add a little sand to actually make sure that you're going to have some drainage. And if you're planting directly into your garden space, again, make sure that your soil drains well, and you can help with your drainage by adding good quality compost. If you're using raised beds, fill your raised beds with something called sandy loam. Okay, so sandy loam soil, and again amend it with 1 to 2 inches of good quality compost. I always just encourage people to buy bed soil. If you're making a raised bed, fill your beds with a reputable soil from a reputable garden store. My favorite is Lingso in San Carlos. Lingso has outstanding soils and soil mixes. They have potting mix, sandy loam, they have compost, they have lots of things. I highly recommend Lingso for your gardening needs. Okay. So when I'll tell you honestly, the slide where we're filling with bagged soils is always a troubling one for me for many, many years. I just, you know, use my regular garden soil, usually somewhere where my dog had dug a hole. It was nice and loose, picked it up, and I would mix half compost and half garden soil. For most of my herbs, it was okay. I did discover that when I moved over to the coast, my soil was a little bit more clay. And so I wasn't really able to do that so much. So then I started having to kind of, you know, mix lots of different things so that I could maintain not only drainage, but also nutrients. And when we're in containers, we have to realize that our herbs are going to need a little bit more fertilizer than they would normally in the garden beds. Okay, so so there are some of the herbs need a little richer soil. Those are basil, chives, dill, mint, parsley. And I kind of like to mix equal parts of sandy loam, potting mix, and compost. So the potting mix or potting soils that I like best, that I think are good quality bagged products, are these two, Gardeners in Bloom and EB Stone. Both of them are OMRI listed and have CDFA listings. Okay, so part of the certification process in California and in the United States. So these two I think are really good. I try to stay away from those bag products that have artificial fertilizers and pesticides and all of that kind of stuff already in it. Okay. So for those herbs that need only moderate fertile soils, sort of like lavender, rosemary, I, you know, just use sandy loam and potting mix in equal parts. Now for your smaller pots, you really, you can just use one of these potting mix all on your own. Edna's especially has a little bit of sand in it, and has perlite and vermiculite in it as well, and so that will help maintain the that sort of a little bit of a gritty need that some of these hardy perennials need. So you can kind of futz with it a little bit. I have planted, 2 years ago, I'll tell a story here. I planted a sage plant, a common sage plant, in 100% bagged potting soil, and I didn't add anything. And it grew for about a year and a half, and then it died. I have much better luck. If I have a little bit of, you know, natural soil, sandy loam, my own compost, and then you can add a little bit of the potting mix if you want. Okay. If you're starting from scratch, and you can get to Lingso's, they have a potting mix that is perfect for our potted herbs, has some sandy loam, sand, and compost. Okay. And a little bit of organic fertilizer. So these are some things that that we need to take into consideration. So the larger the pot, the more able you are to kind of approach something that is more natural. Okay, so if you have huge planters, you can pretty much fill them with sandy loam. When you get the smaller pots, you're going to be using more of kind of, the potting soils, as long as they do have a little bit of sand in them. Okay. All right. So
A quick
yeah.
question on soil.
Yeah.
One person's asking, what amendment do you use for loosening clay-rich soils?
Yes. Clay is very interesting. You can use, most of the time I've just been, adding compost. There are some things that you can use to amend your clay, and I'm just gonna make a note of that, and as soon as it comes to my mind, I will tell you. Okay, great. Okay. Clay is a little bit challenging, especially for herbs. And if you have another option, rather than trying to amend your clay soil, I would do that. But what you can do is you can add gypsum. Okay, it sounds funny, but if you add gypsum, it will help break up the clay soil. At Pacifica Gardens, we had a lot of clay soil, and in the first 3 years we were growing there, we added gypsum, and we also added quite a bit of compost. At the end of about 5 or 6 years, it was still clay soil. However, it was much easier to loosen, a little bit easier to dig, and the plants did quite well. So that's one thing. The other thing is that during the winter months, I know we're kind of going into regular gardening here for a second, but during the winter months, planting a cover crop mix that includes grain like oats or rye will help literally grow organic matter into the clay soil and help break it up. You can also plant daikon radish in the winter months as well. It sends out a very big long taproot that will help break up soils as well, so that you can kind of have a multi-stage strategy to reduce your clay soils by adding gypsum, adding compost, and during the winter you can grow a cover crop mix. So hopefully that helps. Okay. Are there any questions right now, or should we go on?
Yeah, why don't we move on?
Okay.
And
great.
also for folks, we are monitoring the Q&A, but there will be time at the end for that. So keep submitting questions and we will get to that towards the end. Thank you.
Okay. So fertilizing, compost and mulch. We've already talked a lot about compost already. Most herbs do not need frequent fertilizing. That's the good thing. Okay. In fact, some of herbs like rosemary and oregano and lavender, they thrive in what we call lean soil, as in don't fertilize them. Okay. Herbs that are planted in garden soil or raised beds that have been amended with compost will actually not need a lot of fertilizer. Like we mentioned before, herbs grown in containers or smaller pots will do well with a light fertilization of liquid kelp, compost tea, right, or compost tea several times per year. I either make compost tea or actually worm tea from my worm bin. For my business, I use kelp help as a liquid fertilizer for my herbs. So, and also too, Dr. Earth makes a vegan dry fertilizer that's organic, and plus the box is recyclable, actually compostable. So fertilizing, you don't really have to do a lot. And I am actually kind of a lazy gardener when it comes to my perennial herbs. I kind of look at them. If their leaves start getting kind of tiny or they start looking a little scraggly, I think, oh, maybe I should give them some fertilizer. Okay, so they're not like high maintenance things like, you know, roses and basil that if the climate isn't just perfect for them, they fade. So that's one advantage to our hardy perennials. Now is my opportunity to encourage everybody who is a backyard gardener to make your own compost. And I know it sounds like, oh, I can't do that. But making your own compost or having a worm bin is actually quite easy. And once you get in the rhythm of it, it is hardly any more work than taking out the trash on Friday night, okay, or Thursday night for Friday's pickup. And most counties and cities actually have composting programs where their objective is to teach homeowners to compost or vermiculture and have worm bins. The worm bin or the composter, home composter, takes kitchen scraps out of the waste stream, which is really important. Waste stream, and you can also like just translate that out of our water system. When you use your garbage disposal, all of that stuff that could be composted into your yard goes into the water system. So that, I mean, not obviously, I mean, it gets processed, of course, but it just it becomes a burden. The home compost is full of living organisms. So you can get compost any number of places. You can get bag compost. You can get compost from, you know, Recology or other areas or other places. Most of those commercially made composts, and they have to be, and I'm not dissing them, but they have been heated. They have been heated to high heat to kill any pathogens. And so what you don't have is the living organisms that can make your soil very nutritious and hold water and kind of maintain the soil food web. So your own compost is the best thing. And so that's when we're talking about fertilizing. If you have a worm bin or if you have, you know, your own compost, those will be adequate for your herbs. Okay, so you can make teas from compost, from your compost or worm castings, and I highly recommend it. And the really great thing is, since we're talking about water-wise, is that compost saves water. Okay, again, it's the compost, even in your pots, will help maintain the moisture that your plants need, and will actually help reduce evaporation. Okay. That's my plug for composting. Okay, mulching. Mulching also saves water. Okay, it will also help reduce weeds, and it will over time add organic matter to your garden soil. So for container herb gardens, now containers will by definition require a little bit more water because the soil, the entire soil water system and the plant system is above the ground. So mulching is a really valuable water-wise technique for our pots when we're growing in containers. For our thirstier herbs like parsley and basil, you can use straw or you can use leaves. If you live in an area where you have deciduous trees, save those leaves for your compost, but you can also save those leaves for mulching. For the herbs that like soils drier, you can use disease-free wood chips. Okay, the wood chips are great. And for even like lavender, gravel is a good one. Lavender really likes it dry. Okay, but and that will help save water as well. Okay, so how often do I water? Okay, so like I said, many of our herbs are going to be very water-wise, and some are going to take a little bit more water. So what we'd like to do is make sure that we check before we water. This is when I manage the big community garden. So this is one of the things that we train our volunteers to do, not just go out and water because, oh, it's watering, I have to water, but actually check your soil. So you can just put your fingers into the soil and feel for the moisture in the soil. If it feels wet, okay, or damp, okay, then it doesn't need water. For your really drought tolerant herbs like rosemary and lavender, and even thyme, you can put your finger in there and you can feel a little bit of water, or you can feel a little bit of moisture in there, but the soil is a little bit crumbly. They probably still don't need water, okay? But if your soil is still a little moist, but kind of a little bit crumbly and it's parsley, you might want to give them a little bit of water, okay? I always use a low flow watering wand. My favorite ones are the ones that Bosca gave us, which is the one at the top, and watering wands that have the ability to control the amount of water flow that comes out. You want to make sure that when you're watering, especially if you're watering in containers, that the stream of the water isn't so harsh that the soil kind of comes flying out of the pot, or exposes the root system to the herbs. Okay, all right. So any questions on things that we've done before we start talking about the fun part, harvesting?
There was a question kind of related to compost or vermicomposting. How do you keep ants out of your worm bin for this participant? And they killed all of their worms.
Ants, really? Okay, now that's a new one. Usually it's how do I keep other things out of your worm bin? I would have to think about that. Okay, so first thing is find where the ants are coming from. Okay, and there are some eco-friendly, non-poisonous type, and not that I'm recommending, a pesticide, but sprays that can be used on ants. And I wouldn't actually spray it in the worm bin, but I would spray it around if you can identify where the ants are coming from. Hopefully that helps. Okay. Okay. All right. We'll go on to harvesting because we're going to run out of time here. I kind of thought that would happen. Your herbs can be harvested throughout the growing season. All right. So as soon as the plant's big enough to start harvesting, go ahead. You want to make sure that you don't cut or harvest more than about 50% of the plant at a time. I never harvest that much unless I'm trying to make pesto or something like that. But so you want to make sure that when you're harvesting, you leave enough of the plant so that it can produce new growth. And harvest your annual and perennial herbs by snipping the stem at the junction of the leaves. It's pretty self-explanatory. Just sort of look at the branch you're looking at and cut right the stem, right down to the next level, and then you'll have your little snippet of herb. The general rule for cooking is use about twice as much fresh herb as you would a dried herb. So if you are used to using, a teaspoon of dried oregano and you have fresh oregano, so use 2 teaspoons, okay, chopped, okay. So parsley is one of those that is a little bit different. I usually like to harvest the parsley kind of all the way down at the soil level. Same thing with the chives. Cutting it sort of like halfway down the stem just creates a little bit of an ugly thing and kind of a wound that sometimes aphids like to come. Okay, so we want to harvest those all the way down to the soil. So unless you're going to grow your herb specifically for its flowers, okay, or its seed production, remove the flower buds as they appear. Okay, so specifically, in particular for your annual herbs like basil. Okay, so the basil definitely needs to have the flower buds taken off as soon as they appear. If you start letting your basil go to flower, which is completely fine, you can do that, but that's pretty much the end of its season and the leaves start getting kind of bitter. Okay, it's best to harvest the herbs in the morning. Okay, that's when the herb plant oils are at their peak. And always do a little wash, inspect your herbs. You just never know, someone might be visiting and you would, a little beneficial insect might be there. You might not want to take it in the house. Just give it a nice little wash. and enjoy. Okay, so that's the most fun, right? And please enjoy your herbs. Okay, so I have a few herbs that I'd like to go through, some of the more common ones, the ones that most people enjoy growing in their backyard herb garden. So, but before we go there, Jennifer, do we have some questions that seem like we need to answer?
Let's see. There is a question here about liquid fertilizer. Specifically, does VF-11 liquid fertilizer work well for foliar feeding?
I'll be quite honest, I have no idea. um, I've actually never used it. So we'll have to Google it.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Let's see. And there are some other questions specific to specific herbs, but I know you're going to get to that in a second.
Okay.
So why don't we hold off on those questions? But keep asking, folks. And yeah, I'll pause intermittently and or field the questions towards the end. But yeah, why don't we continue?
Okay. All right. So the absolute most popular herb that people want to grow is basil. And I live on the coast side, and I really can't grow basil except for in a greenhouse. And I kind of have given up growing basil, trying to grow basil in my backyard. It works sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't. But it is one of the most popular herbs. And sweet basil or Genovese basil are the most popular. And of course, those are used in our classic pesto, right? And other Italian dishes. Basil is what we call a tender annual, right? It is sensitive to cold. So this is one of those annuals that you don't want to put outside too soon. Okay, so if you and you have to make sure that the nights are above 50 degrees, or so so like up until recently, we were still getting down in the 40s here. It's a warm weather crop, and it requires warm days and between 70 and 80 degrees. Okay, so for those of us who live in cooler climates, we have to sort of engineer our growing techniques. But for those of you who live in warmer climates, basil is actually quite easy to grow. Okay. Basil likes well-drained, moist soil, but not soggy. Okay, so basil is not like thyme. Okay, it's going to need a little bit more water. It likes a little bit more fertile soil. Okay, but it doesn't like to be soggy. Okay, so if you overwater on a regular basis, you'll see the little plants gradually just sort of kind of die. Okay. So harvest basil regularly, like we already talked about. We want to make sure that we do not let it flower. Okay, so you can just pinch off the stems where the leaves meet, and like I said, prune often, and to avoid having the leaves get bitter. There are many other varieties of basil, including Thai basil. When I lived in Fremont, I grew Thai basil routinely. There's lemon and all different kinds of purple varieties as well. Basil is actually quite beautiful, and sometimes people like to have a combination of their basils, so some purple and some of the darker green Genovese and some of the lighter color sweet basil. That's actually, but in terms of, so people want, how many basil plants should I plant if I want to make pesto? More than one. Okay, so if you plan on making your own pesto, you're probably going to need about 4 or 5 plants. I would try to put them in a raised garden bed where they have nice, rich, well-drained soil and full sunlight. Okay, so if you want your basil just to for topping for pizza or for salad dressing or something like that, you can grow 1 or 2 basil plants in your windowsill if you want. Okay, so it just depends on what you want to do with your basil. Cilantro is a lot more popular now than it was 10 or 15 years ago, and it has a very unique flavor. You either love it, okay, or you hate it. Some people say, "Ooh, it tastes like soap." Okay, my husband says it just tastes like soap to me. I love cilantro. I love putting it in, you know, on my hot dishes, you know, from chili to curries. All right, it's actually it's one of my favorite herbs. It can be a little bit of a challenge to grow, at least starting from seed. Sometimes it can get too hot. You can actually burn your cilantro, even if you have it in full sun. You think, huh, it's supposed to be in full sun. It's usually okay. But cilantro can take a little cool, okay? So the seeds of a cilantro plant, okay, are, it's coriander, right? So coriander seed. So if you like coriander seed and you want to, at the end of the season, just let your cilantro go to seed, it grows very quickly, okay, and will produce seed for you. One of the things that a lot of people get frustrated with cilantro is because it is such a short-lived annual herb. It will grow from beginning to end in just a couple of months, and sometimes you think, wow, what happened there? I did something wrong. Cilantro is a short season annual. I like, in the sunnier climates, I like to grow it underneath a shade net. Okay, growing it underneath a shade net prevents or delays the bolting of it. Okay. If you like cilantro and you want it throughout the summer, then create yourself a little strategy where you grow cilantro in succession. Okay, so plant one month, all right, plant another one another month. Okay, and so that way you'll have cilantro throughout the summer. Chives. Chives are really easy to grow. They are a perennial. They are part of the onion family. They do well in warm and cooler temperatures. I always have a couple of pots of chives growing. You know, there's lots of advice. Oh, don't let it flower because, you know, the seeds will go everywhere. Well, I'm okay with that. I love the chives flowers. The chives flowers are edible, and the bees love them, and they just have a nice look about them. They're little puffs of purple flower. And so when you need your chives, you just go in and cut down the little shoots as needed. Sort of at the end of the year, if they're looking a little bit scraggly, go in there and do a good trim job, and then they'll emerge in the spring. Dill is an annual, okay? And so dill is an annual, and similar to basil, not the same family, but similar to basil, is a warm weather herb. And so it doesn't really do well in the cooler climates, the foggier climates. So it needs a little bit of heat. So dill is the dill pickle, okay? So it's your classic pickling herb. It can be grown from seed pretty easily. Oops, I have a typo there. It tends not to transplant very easily. So if you want some dill, probably, you know, I grow them in pots all the time. I mean, I grow them in containers to be transplanted, but sometimes they don't transplant very well. Okay. Dill gets kind of tall, maybe 2 to 4 feet. So windier climates, you need a little bit of protection. Okay. And it's going to need loose, well-amended soil like some of our others. Harvest the leaves before the plant goes to seed. So 2 things will happen. I like dill for the actual leaves themselves. So if it starts going to seed, kind of cut it off, and it will kind of slow it down a little bit. Okay. But if your dill goes to flower, it's great for attracting beneficial insects, and plus it smells great, just in the garden, even if it's going to seed. Marjoram is actually my basil substitute here on the coast, because it's what we call a tender perennial. On the coast side, it becomes it is a perennial. In some colder climates, though, sometimes you'll have to plant it every year. It is a very close relative of oregano. It has a little more woody and a more floral kind of aroma to it. All right, so our flavor, and oregano is going to be a little stronger and spicy. Okay, so marjoram is going to need moderate fertility and full sun, although mine does not get full sun and it does quite well. The flowers of marjoram or sweet marjoram look like little knots, okay? And you can actually tell the difference between marjoram and oregano. There are sometimes problems between those two because nursery, well, actually, will produce a cross between oregano and marjoram sometimes. So we think there's going to be several of our herbs, the oregano, right? The Oreganum genus, right? So everybody thinks it's oregano. And so sometimes we can get them confused. Mints are really fun to grow if you've never grown mint before. There are tons of varieties of mints, including spearmint, peppermint, chocolate mint, mojito mint, pineapple mint, you name it. If you're going to grow multiple mints, grow them in separate containers. I highly recommend that you, unless you are fine with your garden being taken over, or you have a huge space with mint, probably best to grow them in containers. Mint is propagated by cuttings, so best to initially to buy a start that has been started from a cutting, and then as you get as you get more experience, you yourself can create your own cuttings, get cuttings from your neighbors. Okay. Mint likes rich, moist soil and will grow in sun or partial shade. I have my mint kind of in a partial shade, and a lot of people say, I don't know, how could anybody kill mint? I can tell you, I have killed mint before, and it's because I had it in a pot that was too small and it didn't get enough water. The root systems on mint will actually grow really quickly. Okay, so you have to kind of get in there and pull them out every year or so, and then you can replant them. Okay, so let's talk a little about oregano. And oregano can be a little bit complicated. And I say complicated because I have made many mistakes with regard to oregano. So the Latin name, okay, we have to learn a little Latin here, is Oreganum vulgare hirtum. Okay, so, or Oreganum heracloideum, okay, which however you would say that. I just definitely, if I were you, I would take that to the nursery. What we want to do, we'll make sure that we get some version of Oreganum vulgare hirtum, okay, which is also known as Greek oregano, okay. So as we know, oregano is well known in Italian cuisine, and it is a relative of marjoram. Marjoram is also the same family. The species themselves can get a little complicated. Several species of oreganum are called oregano. Sometimes you'll see something called Italian oregano, which is another species of Oreganum vulgare. All right, and it is actually better suited as an ornamental. It tastes kind of grassy. Okay. So when you buy your oregano, make sure that you're getting an edible one and not an ornamental one. There are lots of ornamental type oreganos. Okay, so oregano does like well-drained sandy soil, and it does great in warm weather, and actually it does fine in cooler weathers as well. Okay, so oregano is a perennial, and so it will grow for quite some time. Parsley is one of my favorite ones. I'm a big, I like to cook with parsley. I make a lot of soup stocks. I plant usually 3 to 4 parsley plants a year in a raised garden bed. I want to write down at the bottom of the slide is gopher alert. Most of our perennial herbs are gopher resistant, right? Gophers don't really like to eat rosemary. They don't really like to eat chives, but they love parsley, okay? And they'll eat cilantro as well. So if you're wanting to plant parsley, make sure you either put it in a big container or a pot or a raised bed or gopher screened type bed. I have literally watched a gopher just take down an entire parsley plant. They love it, okay? Parsley is a cold hardy biennial herb. What does that mean? Okay, so it will grow and produce leaves during its first year. So plant your parsley now, it'll grow all season. You'll have parsley all during the summer, all winter long, because it is cool hardy. Okay, and then even in the first few months of the spring, kind of late in the spring, it'll go to seed. Mine is all going to seed right now, but I'm still using it. Okay, so and then you'll have to plant another one, right? So parsley is kind of in between an annual and a perennial. Okay, lasts a lot longer than, say, basil or dill or cilantro, but it still will only last about 2 years. Okay, let's see. Yep, parsley does well in partial shade or shade. And if you have a shaded area in your garden you don't know what to do with, plant some parsley. It'll actually do quite well. There are a couple of varieties of parsley, flat and curly. We usually think of curly as being sort of the garnish, right? It's great for salad dressings as well. Flat parsley is a little bit more robust flavor that stands up to cooking, all right? So it's great for sauces and soup stocks. Rosemary. Now, rosemary is a woody shrub. Most people go, I don't know how you can kill a rosemary plant. They do really well. They hardly need any fertilizing whatsoever. I like to add a little bit of compost because I have clay soil to them, but they really do like to be grown lean. So fertilizer, not necessary. Okay. But the big problem with rosemary, if you're in clay soil, right? If you're in clay soil and the soil does not drain well, rosemary does not like wet feet, and you can kill it. And we've done that a couple of times at the big garden. Okay. So rosemary has common rosemary is usually upright. There are several creeping or prostate rosemaries that can also be used for culinary use, right? Rosemary, you'll see a lot of times you can use rosemary in rock gardens, in your ornamental plantings, kind of intermixing it. Rosemary is actually great. Okay, it is a strong herb. Okay, so use it judiciously. Okay, and it blooms in the springtime, and it makes these beautiful blue flowers, and the bees love it, right? And then after that, you just harvest pretty much any time. Just go in there with your little scissors and clip off. This is actually my rosemary in my yard. That's sort of at the end of its flowering season, and it looks like it needs a little bit of water. Okay. All right, sage. So sage, also known as garden sage or Salvia officinalis, there are hundreds of kinds of sages or salvias, okay, but only a few of them are used as culinary herbs, and quote, garden sage, okay, is the most common. Garden sage is part of that whole Mediterranean herb kind of grouping there that can tolerate less water, but also does very well in our climate. Okay, so it does prefer moderately fertile soil, but it's not really fussy. You can abuse it a little bit, and I have done that. Okay, it does prefer full sun, but like I said, it does pretty well in a foggy climate. Harvest the leaves whenever you need them. Okay, and sort of at the end of the year, but not December. Okay, but kind of right around September. Trim back some of the large woody stems, and then in the spring it will actually grow back. Okay. As we know, sage is our traditional herb for poultry stuffing, but I like to use it in hearty soup stocks and pumpkin soups. They're absolutely great. Butternut squash soup, butternut squash ravioli with sage on top is amazing. Okay, thyme. Thyme is the most common is Thymus Vulgaris, or what we call common thyme. It's also known as English thyme. All right, and there are other species of edible thyme that's called lemon thyme. All right, we can see lemon thyme. We see that periodically. Has a lemony scent and is used similarly to English thyme. So there are other thymes, including creeping thymes, that are better suited for ornamentals and ground covers. So when you're looking at thymes, make sure, again, we don't want to have to learn too much Latin, but if we're looking for an edible thyme, we're really looking at something that's called Thymus vulgaris. Okay, vulgaris means common. The thyme is a small plant. It grows pretty slowly. Okay, so if you're putting multiple herbs in the same pot, putting that in the same pot, say with rosemary, is not a good idea. Rosemary gets really big. All right, thyme is pretty small. Okay, so it grows kind of slow. And you can harvest it whenever you want. It produces cute little, tiny little flowers in the springtime. And over time, it can get a little bit woody, and sometimes we have to replace them. That said, I have 3 pots of thyme in my backyard that have been there for about 5 years. I go in there and kind of, get a little brutal with my pruning, and so far everybody's come back. Okay. All right. So I think we're just about, yep, we're almost there. Yay. Okay. There's several other herbs like lavender we haven't talked about, tarragon we haven't talked about, lemon balm, lots of other things that are really popular. We just kind of literally run out of time. Very funny, but there you can look them up pretty easily, and they usually will fit into kind of this idea of a hardy perennial, or something that like a mint, like lemon balm, that's going to be from the mint family, has similar growing requirements. And then of course, there's just a wide variety of other herbs that we really haven't had a chance to talk about. But I just want to give you just one slide of some resources. I grow almost all of my herbs from seed that I can. Obviously, things like rosemary and tarragon and mints all grow from cuttings. But seed companies that I think are reputable seed companies that you can get organic seed, True Leaf Market, Peace Valley Farm Supply, Territorial Seeds, and Botanical Interests are all seeds that I've used, and respect the companies. Nurseries in the Bay Area. Now, I know there used to be a Sloat nursery center in the Burlingame area. I understand it's now closed, but there are still several other Bay Area stores. If you're close by, Half Moon Bay Nursery almost always has a really good selection of culinary herbs. If you're in the East Bay, in Fremont, that's the one I used to shop at, is Reagan Nursery. Now, Ace Hardwares are all independently owned. One Ace Hardware on the coast side carries a lot of organic culinary herbs, and one doesn't. So, the nurseries do vary, so check. And if you have to do a big box, I kind of like to stay away from bagged soil and big box nurseries. But sometimes you just, want something and you can't find it. I prefer Lowe's. They tend to, they just tend to have a better nursery. There's online nurseries, lots of different companies. Annie's Annuals, Burpee, Territorial will also grow starch in the springtime as well. We kind of mentioned the soils. Lingso is my go-to place for all my garden needs. But when I need something bagged, I like E.B. Stone and Gardeners in Bloom. My favorite books are Golden Gate Gardening by Pam Pierce. Like I said, I live on the coast side. So knowing how to grow herbs and all vegetables in a cooler climate has been really important for me. I always cross-check everything with the California Master Gardener Handbook, and have a couple of herb specific books that I enjoy looking at. They were my mom's. They're sort of older versions, but they have valuable information. So with that, I believe we are finished with the presentation. So Jennifer, should we try to answer some questions?
Yeah, let's start. Thank you for the presentation. I'll start at the beginning. So one of our participants wondering, can you grow lavender in containers?
Yes, absolutely. Lavender is very well in containers. Now, that one picture early up was my new lavender, and it was in a 4-inch pot last year. And lavender likes it kind of like a tight environment. So it's been growing and filling up that. And so I'm hoping that it's going to bloom pretty soon. But yes, lavender does very well in containers. The one thing that we need to remember about lavender is that it likes gritty soil. So, so sand or even a little bit of pebbles. And I hate to keep talking about Lingso, but Lingso carries something called essential soil. It actually has pebbles in it. It's really ideal for lavender because lavender really likes good drainage.
Great.
But yes.
Great. And then can you touch on, this is circling back to that first question I asked you, how large of a container do you need per herb?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't quite answer that. I didn't quite answer that. Because I like, for my perennial herbs, I kind of like them to get as big as possible. So I kind of don't do anything that's smaller than 12 inches across. All right. I actually prefer the 18-inch ones, and I actually have my sage in a 24-inch one. So, and I put one herb per plant, per pot in there because I just like them that way. And it's just, for some people, that's a little excessive. You would have, pots everywhere, which I do have. But you can grow some together. Like you can grow like thyme and oregano would be a good combination to kind of grow together, or sometimes you can get actually a dwarf sage. Yeah, so I know people have grown perennials in smaller containers. I don't think they do as well, but that's why I like, at least like your 12-inch pot. I hope that answers the question.
Got it. So this next question is a two-part question for two different herbs.
Okay.
The first one is, I have an oregano taking over my flower beds and the lawn. Do I just have to keep pulling it out?
Yes, you do. Yes. Oregano is not quite as bad as mint, but it can get a little aggressive. That's why it probably will do. It's probably more easily, obviously, contained in a container. But yeah, just keep digging it out over time. If you're trying to get rid of it, then yeah, over time you will be able to dig it out.
Okay. And then the second question is regarding rosemary. This participant's rosemary has micro speckles on the leaves, and it's been there for years. Is it still edible?
Like little black spots.
It doesn't say, but
Okay. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Well, I tend to try to stay away from things that look like that might not be completely healthy. My rosemary, again, because I'm in a cooler, foggier climate, sometimes it sort of looks like it has a little bit of a fungus on it. I just trim the new growth, which is nice and clean and is perfectly edible. Without actually knowing what it is, it's a little hard to tell.
Okay. So we have a question regarding growing plants indoors. This person doesn't have a patio, so they keep their plants inside.
Okay.
And they buy potted herbs and put it right next to the window where it gets full sun, but they keep on dying. And so this person has tried watering less or more, move them around, but they still die or get moldy. Any tips?
Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah. So I would, let's see, what will we do for that one? Start by, okay. So make sure that your pots have drainage. Sometimes with the indoor plants, we go, the drainage is problematic. So make sure that the pots have nice drainage. Use a good quality, I hate to say this, a good quality organic potting soil, which is what we would need for that as well. And then perhaps um, add a little bit of because they're small, I might actually fertilize them a little bit with my personal favorite, because I try not to use animal products, is the kelp help, and that's 2 tablespoons per gallon of water, and see if that doesn't also help. Sometimes when we're right up against a window and we think that's a south facing window, it might be that there is actually too much heat. I did a little bit of an experiment on my own yard once. I thought, well, this is a nice warm spot. You know, maybe I'll put my basil here. Well, I put my thermometer there and it was like 95 degrees, and I live on the coast. So it might be that it is just a little bit too hot. So a little bit of shade. I know that sounds kind of silly, but I'm just thinking, trying to think of ways like get one of those window shades that you put on the interior of your car that, will kind of maybe give it a little bit of shade in the hot part of the day and take it off as the sun sets. That might help. Let me think of what else. Trying to think of, usually they usually do pretty well. But generally speaking, in the smaller containers, they might not last as long as they would if they were able to be outside. I don't know. Does that help at all?
I've also heard that maybe opening a window, so if you get the natural breeze and the wind, that usually helps provide some resiliency for plants, because I know a lot of times when you're keeping it indoors, it's very static, and actually when plants have evolved to be resilient with the wind and all these other animals that fly by, and so you
Yeah.
kind of need to
Yeah.
create that environment inside. When you just have closed doors and closed windows, you need to have some kind of movement so that the plants can kind of move around and be stronger.
Yeah, that's a perfect point. Yeah. If the house is closed up all the time, then yeah, it's not going to get the ventilation that it needs. The other thing is, lots of really cool things happen outside with beneficial insects and, like you say, a little bit of breeze, and that may or may not happen in the house. So though that's definitely air and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So moving on. So speaking of kitchen window gardens, excuse me, this person has an infestation of fruit flies. At least that's what they think they are, and they're wondering how can they avoid this problem. I guess those fruit flies seem to lay a lot of eggs.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay. So fruit flies kind of hang out when there is, decomposing matter. So take them outside, take the plants outside, and there are some organic insecticidal soaps that will very often help with some of that. And if you can take them outside for a few days, take them outside during the day, bring them inside at night if it's going to be too cold. You can kind of do that. Again, make sure that the rest of the environment doesn't have like if you have a bowl of bananas, right? Because bananas will tend to attract fruit flies as well. Kind of try to monitor that, and to make sure that there isn't any really ripe fruit around, because that will also help. That will also draw fruit flies. But in the cases of the indoor garden that has little bugs and stuff, I would use a little bit of insecticidal soap and try to get them outside.
Yeah, and I've had that with some of my indoor plants, and I found that if you put like little rocks, little pebbles, or even compost on top, so it's not just the bare soil that's being exposed, and that can help mitigate that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so question about drainage. So herbs need good drainage. Does that mean that we shouldn't put them in a self-watering container?
The self-watering container, you mean that comes from the bottom?
Yeah, it doesn't say,
Yeah.
but yes, let's assume that
Yeah.
is the case.
So for your annuals that need a little bit more water, like the basil or the parsley or even the mint, the self-watering containers should be fine. The ones that you're could potentially have issues with are going to be the ones that are more what we call drought tolerant or that like it dry. Okay, so your lavender, your thyme. If you're growing rosemary inside, or or even outside in a self-watering container, they might actually get too much water. You will know if those herbs are getting too much water because they will turn yellow pretty quickly. And so yeah, you can always try it. I've never grown the hardy perennials in self-watering containers, so you can experiment, but my suspicion is that the annuals that need more water will do fine, and that the hardy perennials might end up with too much water.
Great. All right. Let's see. So moving on. One person's thinking about getting a mini wood chipper for mulching. Is it worth it, and do they work well?
Mini chippers. Okay, I have a mini chipper, and unless you are pretty strong and actually get your branches chipped pretty quickly, it's probably not worth it. We have a mini chipper at the garden, and we've used it like 3 times. So, if you have somebody who can get out there and chip everything right away, it's great. My personal experience is that we have plenty of opportunities to, get good chips. The other thing too is a lot of the tree companies, if you have a lot of things that need to be chipped, you can hire them to come bring their chipper, and they'll chip things for you, and then that's it. So the chippers are expensive. My personal feeling is that unless you have a lot of trees, it's probably not worth it. But that's just my opinion.
Great. And a question specific to green onion. How do you plant green onion?
Oh, you mean like a scallion?
Yes.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah. So same family as chives. So you can buy scallions or spring onions or bunching onions, are all kind of like that same category. You can buy them at nurseries, or you can grow them by seed. They actually do pretty well. Just growing them as a seed, you can start them indoors. Put them in a little 4-inch pot. Make sure they're covered with a little bit of soil. Make sure they stay wet. Okay, so just like the basic things for seeds is cover them just with a tiny little bit of soil. Make sure they stay wet until they germinate. They do take a little bit longer to germinate than some other seeds. Like arugula, for instance, will germinate in like 4 days. Green onions will sometimes take, up to a week or maybe even longer. When I germinate almost all of my seeds now, I do it in the dark. So I put them in their pot and I cover them up. And then I look at them every day, make sure that I spritz them with my little water spritzer, make sure that they're moist. As soon as I see them germinate, then I take the top off, and then they can get a little bit of sun or a little bit of light after that. But green onions, then after you have them in your little pot, depends on how much you want to do, you can just plant them directly into your garden bed, or you can actually grow them in pots as well. They're actually pretty easy to grow.
Great. So we have about 5 minutes left, so I'm just gonna rapid fire these questions, and yeah, if you can, yeah.
I'll be brief.
Okay, great. Okay, question about lavender in containers. Do I need to repot the lavender if it gets root bound?
Well, yes, but it likes being root bound. Okay, but if it's been there for a long time and it's clearly root bound and the leaves are getting smaller and it's the flowers are getting smaller, then yes.
Okay. Would you recommend using neem oil on moldy indoor herbs?
Moldy indoor herbs. Mostly for anything that's moldy, that means that it's too much moisture, too much well, actually too much humidity. Bring them outside, cut everything off. I mean, cut all the moldy part off. And there's actually, I like using another one that's it's a fungicide called it's made by Safer, rather than the neem oil. Does that help?
Okay. What do you suggest for, let's see. Oh, actually, I think we already answered this one about fruit flies. Is harvesting cilantro similar to parsley?
Yes, it is. Yeah, take it. Yeah, harvest down to the ground if you want. I mean, yeah. I mean, not the whole thing, right? But just a branch at a time or a stem at a time.
Okay. And then speaking of parsley, this person has been growing parsley in an 8-inch round pot for a year. What do you recommend for them to do to stimulate more growth?
Oh, okay. So parsley actually needs a little bit more fertility. So use a liquid fertilizer. I like the kelp liquid fertilizer, but fish emulsion will do as well. There's also some dry fertilizers that you can use. But the 8-inch pot becomes the problem because the parsley actually has a fairly good sized root system.
Great. And then a question about pot material. So what pot material do you recommend? For example, plastic, terracotta, glazed, etc.
Yeah, I like to stay away from plastic for a lot of reasons. They tend not to be very water wise. The ceramic terracotta will hold the water a little bit better. If you're planting your perennial herbs in a plastic pot, sometimes the actual herb itself will outlive the plastic pot. But that said, not everybody can, like get all those terracotta pots. So for short term, you definitely can use plastic. But again, those plants will dry out more quickly rather than the clay or the ceramic pots.
Great. And then question kind of similar to before about the bugs. So this person has a mint that's getting constantly eaten by bugs. What can they do to prevent this?
Depends on what kind of bugs it is. Cabbage loopers tend to like mint. I don't know why, but they do. So that's where I use the Safer insecticidal soap. Again, it's kind of hard to know what kind of the bug it is, but just generally speaking, when a plant is being attacked by something, it's a sign that moisture isn't right. Maybe the size of the pot isn't right. Maybe it needs more nutrients. Maybe the drainage isn't. So take a look at all of the parameters and then kind of try to balance those out. When all else fails, add compost, because for some reason it will usually help with almost any of the herbs. And mint does take a little bit more fertile soil.
Great. And then one person noted that Cape sundews are great indoor plants to catch fruit flies and fungus gnats. Parasitic nematodes into the soil of indoor plants can kill off the gnats. So
Oh,
yeah, thank you for
there you
that.
go. There you go.
Okay, so I know we're coming up on 8:30, but we have a couple more questions. Do you have some
Okay.
time to
Mhm.
just answer these last few ones?
Sure.
Okay, great. Okay, so this person has chives smelling plants in the yard that have white flowers. Is this garlic chives?
Yes, it probably is. If it's really clumping, it probably is garlic chives. And the other thing is that there is another kind of clumping a chive that is almost like a native, right? That is, or that's kind of wild, okay? Wild onions or something like that. So I'm not sure if they're talking about something that's wild or if they're talking about something that actually was planted. But yes, garlic chives will kind of looks a little bit like regular chives, but the flower is a different color.
Great. And let's see, which herbs can be propagated through cuttings?
So mint, rosemary, lavender, tarragon, actually thyme can, even oregano can. Trying to think, although thyme and oregano, I like to plant them from seeds, but ones that need to be propagated by cuttings, rosemary, tarragon for sure, it doesn't ever flower, French tarragon, and lavender, those all pretty much need to be propagated by cutting. You can grow lavender from a seed, but it's a little bit dicey sometimes.
Great. And then our last question, any specific tips or things to avoid for growing herbs in containers on the patio with lots of shade? What herbs will grow best and which ones to avoid?
Yeah, so things that if you have shade, so your parsley will do well, will do okay in shade. Chives can tolerate some shade. Even cilantro can tolerate some shade. Let's see, things that my sage, actually, I know sage is supposed to be full sun, but mine gets shade and it does fine. Mint can tolerate shade. Tarragon can tolerate shade. Let me see. That's probably the ones that we've talked about. Yeah, those are some.
Okay.
Mhm.
Great. Well, that concludes all the questions that we got. Thank you so much,
Okay.
Loretta, for this
Right.
wonderful and very comprehensive presentation. I know this was supposed to be an introduction to herb garden, but there's so much information in here, and there really could be another a second part to this.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Designing your garden. Yeah. Yeah. Because there's fun. It's fun making spirals too. So anyway,
Yes.
great.
Well, if you're still with us, thank you so much for sticking with us to the end. We are recording this webinar and we will be sending a link to a copy of this recording if you've registered on Zoom, so you can rewatch it or forward it to any of your friends or family members who might be interested in cultivating herbs for themselves.
Right.
And with that, thank you everyone and hope everyone has a good evening.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.